Big weekend of Premier League action coming up. We've got Manchester United against Tottenham tomorrow at 5:30, probably the pick of the fixtures. Daniel Harris is with us. Daniel, good morning to you.
Hello.
We'll start with matters off the fields, which will probably impact on the field eventually. Chelsea Football Club, Abramovich getting sanctioned yesterday. A new dawn for football where I guess we can sleep easy at night knowing that everything is right in the world once again.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's a wake-up call for everyone, really, because it tells us what should have been known and what I'm sure a lot of people who were in a position to stop it from happening in the first place knew when he bought Chelsea in 2003. I mean, Abramovich is a bad lot. What the iteration of all the things he's done it's extremely damning that he is involved in an illegal invasion that's going to lead to the creation of 2 million refugees, God knows how many deaths. And that's who Abramovich is. And it's important that the people know, and it's important that football knows, because if you look at the impact of Abramovich on football, that's one thing. But if you look at the impact of Abramovich on the world, that is an entirely different thing. And it's not just Abramovich, is it, who is involved, very significantly webbed up in football, but is involved in some absolutely dreadful behaviour the rest of the time.
When you consider what the knock-on impact of this might be in the rest of the Premier League and the rest of English football, do you feel any sense of hope that this actually will be a watershed moment?
There's always hope, because there has to be. If there's no hope, then what else have we got? But it seems unlikely that, having waved through the Saudi takeover of Newcastle just a couple of months ago, they're suddenly going to say, well, actually, we're not having that anymore. They're not going to do that in Manchester City either. I mean, this is a Tory government. They're not about to start requisitioning private property in favour of the people, I don't think. I mean, in Tracy Crouch's review, there was something about a golden share that supporters would have that would give them the decision-making power, but no one's currently talking about that. And it may be that they're not talking about it because at the moment there's an illegal war going on. It may just be that, and we'll get to it, but it doesn't feel that that's the kind of thing that they're going to start making a big deal out of. But I might be wrong.
I think we had this conversation, or we touched on this conversation with you last week, Daniel, about the sense of fans taking back ownership of football. Just in the context of Chelsea alone, is there an opportunity for fans to finally get back control of a club that obviously they were almost happy to lose and happy to have a billionaire oligarch run the club for the last little while? But can this turn into a greater connection once again between Chelsea and its fans?
It's possible. I mean, the Chelsea Supporters Trust and Chelsea pitch owners are quite well-organised, long-standing bodies. I think it probably depends what they want to fight for. They may make a big deal out of the fact that Abramovich is no longer their owner. And I mean, I saw the opening post by the Chelsea Supporters Trust that pretty much said that it's not fair on the supporters because all this uncertainty. And ultimately, at this point, the supporters are not really the height of anyone's concern, nor should they be. Chelsea supporters have had, 20-odd years of ridiculous success as a consequence of absolutely revoltingly dirty money. So the fact that has now come back to bite them, you have to, at some level, take the rough with the smooth. However, football supporters should not be placed in this position of having to be the moral arbiters of who should and shouldn't own their club, because it's not them who's in charge of actually making sure that happens. So in a sense, I feel for Chelsea supporters, but I'm not sure how many of them have really asked themselves any of the difficult questions about Abramovich. There's been no opposition to Abramovich. There's been no campaign to educate people about who Abramovich is. There's just been, my experience of it anyway, is just people waving notes about, singing about how rich they are, singing about how poor other people are, singing about Abramovich over the minute's silence to Ukraine, singing a minute's applause to Ukraine, singing about Abramovich last night when we've been told that he's involved in helping an illegal invasion take place. So at that level, it's not that easy to feel a great deal of sympathy with Chelsea supporters, but perhaps there are some who take a slightly more mature approach to this than my team gets to dance around with silver pots, therefore he is a hero.
It is the battle of the good guys on Sundays, Chelsea against Newcastle at 2 o'clock in the Premier League. It does feel a little bit insignificant talking about some of the other events in the football world, but if you can just bring it back to Wednesday night, Daniel, and this is in the Manchester United context, the Paris Saint-Germain collapse against Real Madrid. Feel free to put your United hat on. How much of it were you looking at Mauricio Pochettino saying to yourself, listen, I'm not sure about this guy as Manchester United manager, or is that a way too reactionary response to one game?
I mean, you can always look at things however you want to find them. And I honestly, I don't know about Pochettino. He did a really good job at Southampton. He did an unbelievable job at Tottenham. PSG, the players aren't quite right for him, I think. But at the same time, you do wonder if there was something very specific about the circumstances he found at Spurs, the players that he had, the way he interacted with them, that just kind of made him the right man to be in that place at that time. And we don't know that he'd be the right man in the right place at United. As far as the game itself went, they were playing pretty well till Donnarumma chucked one in. So you could exonerate him from blame for what went on there. But at the same time, they are top of the league in France, but there have been some really poor performances. So you could say that that's on him, or you could say, well, he doesn't have a squad that suits the way he wants to play football, and the players bottled that once he'd already sent them out onto the pitch. The bottom line is that no one knows for sure who the right next manager of United is. It could be him, and what I like about him is the fact that he's got the kind of personality, not just that consumes things, but that brings people together. And that is something that United need. And I definitely think he's got that. I see more of that in him than I see in Ten Hag, and more than that probably than I see in Luis Enrique either, who's probably another decent candidate. But at the same time, you think, well, is he just not quite as good as Klopp and Guardiola in their generation? You're trying to find the best guy in the next generation that isn't him. No one knows the answer to this question. Various people have tried to answer this question various times since 2013, and they've got it judderingly wrong every time. And it's not science. If it was science, it would just be quite well, go and get this person. But there are very few sure things in football management, and the two that there are have been taken by Manchester City and Liverpool. So you have to find someone who is a gamble. And to me, I would always try and gamble on the person I thought had the highest upside, rather than the person who felt least likely to be a failure.
Tied into that, obviously, his demand is there at the minute, and I was watching back the Gary Neville, Mika Richards exchange on Sky last night, Daniel, and Gary Neville talking about the Ralph Rangnick essentially been on an information gathering mission, was his exact phrase at the minute, looking at structures and people at the club, and then in a way that he can pass that on to the next manager. If that is actually true, that is one of the worst decisions, surely, that in a litany of bad decisions that Manchester United have made, to make the manager the guy who's also effectively auditing the club.
I don't think so. I think that they basically, the board basically wrote off this season. Anything they could get out of this season was a bonus, and by sticking in someone who's going to be staying there, he was now in a great position to tell the next manager who's worth keeping and who isn't worth keeping, what the squad needs.
Sorry, Daniel, to interrupt you. Can I just say on that point, I mean, I could tell the club which players need to be kept and which don't. I don't need to be the manager of the club to do that.
Really? You think that your judgment is as good as the judgment of Ralph Rangnick, who's training with the players every day, who's interacting with the players every day, who's watching the team from the touchline, who has the background in football that he has? I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that he knows more about football than I do. So putting him in that position is a better move than putting me in that position. And yeah, we can all go, well, Lingard's got to go, Martial's got to go. But it's also
Isn't it that straightforward? Are we not complicating it? And I was obviously exaggerating the point to say that I could do it. The point being that he could do it without having to be the manager of the club.
Maybe, but if you parachute someone in, right? If someone comes in at the beginning of pre-season, they're going to want to look at the players. They're going to want to see the players in pre-season and see how they want to play and who they want to get rid of and who they want to keep. And maybe a particular player comes back and they impress in training or not. And having someone there gathering information beforehand who's going to be involved in the appointment of the next guy and who plays football in the way that the club has decided that they want to play, I don't see that that's... I can see that it's a bit like having a supply teacher in terms of what happens between now and the end of the season, that the players probably don't think, well, this guy is going to control my future, even though he is going to be involved in that. They don't have to do what he says because they're now setting the pattern of, well, if you don't like this manager, it doesn't matter. There'll be another one along in a minute. And they're now setting that pattern. So I can see how that would be a downside, but I don't see that someone who's understands football on a pretty high technical level will be sitting there thinking, well, we need this kind of profile of midfielder to combine with the profile of midfielders that we've already got, because when we play, this is how we're going to play in the future. And I think that in order to make those judgments, someone who understands and who's a significant thinker about the game is quite useful.
Sorry, one more on it. Just if it is the case, right, that he is that bridge, he's that auditor, he's passing that information on, don't all managers, and like if Pochettino comes in, let's say hypothetically, don't all managers at that level pride themselves on the fact that I can come into that club and I can actually actively impact on the likes of Marcus Rashford, who's been entirely cut adrift from the Rangnick plans, but Pochettino comes in and says, actually, I can take that guy and I can make him world class again?
I think that would be in everyone's interests. I don't think that Rangnick was going to say, well, just hoof Rashford out of there, because everyone knows that there's a player in there and there's something at the moment that isn't quite right. So I don't think that the next manager is going to come in and just be ordered what to do by Rangnick. And if the next bloke comes in and says, yeah, I've decided that Rashford's rubbish, get rid of him without taking a look at him, that would be an alarm bell for me, because we know that Rashford's a player. I don't think it's that. I think it's being able to recommend, because you've already done your research, essentially, being able to recommend the players to keep, the players you want to stay, the profile of players that you want to replace the players that leave with, the profile of players that you want to sign, and then you're in a position to start researching those, to start setting up deals with those for the next guy to come in and say yes or no. Doesn't always work. David Moyes came in and didn't want Thiago. Van Gaal came in and Moyes had set up a deal for Toni Kroos. Van Gaal went and signed Ander Herrera instead. It doesn't always work like that. It hasn't worked like that for United. But I guess what you hope is the guy that you appoint to succeed Rangnick is someone with a similar vision of football to Rangnick, and then he's able to pass over the intel. But ultimately, it will be the new guy who makes the decisions, and he'll stand or fall by those decisions that he makes. But having access to this intelligence from someone like Rangnick, who is respected in the world of football thinking and football tactics, and is personable and straight and honest, I don't see that that's a bad thing.
If Rangnick is going to be involved in the appointment of the new manager and makes an educated piece of advice on behalf of the new manager, should he not be going to Amsterdam and going to Paris to talk to Ten Hag and talk to Pochettino and watch their teams play?
Yes. I mean, he's got quite a big job in terms of the season at the moment, and I don't know what the division of labour is in that aspect. I think that Ralph Rangnick suddenly turning up at Schiphol would not be the way that they would go about it, because we know how the press are and we know what would then happen.
Doesn't that prove the absurdity of the whole thing?
What's the absurdity, sorry?
The fact that this guy is currently manager of Manchester United and is already locked in an advisor role post that.
Why is that absurd?
Because, as I say, as you pointed out there, the way the media would go if he actually went and spoke to these guys, went and watched their training sessions, went and watched their matches, it would be completely unbecoming of a football manager, which he currently is.
Right, but who would it not be unbecoming? If suddenly Darren Fletcher and John Mertes turn up at Schiphol, it'd be the same thing. This is no different really to when any club appoints a manager. You gather as much intelligence on them as you can. You speak to people around them. You speak to them, and then you make a decision, and that'll be what's going on right now. And you can't criticise. You can. You can criticise United for not having football people making football decisions. Now United have football people making football decisions. So how would you go about this? I'm confused.
No, I'm just making the point that this guy, if he is advisor for Manchester United, that makes perfect sense, and he can go in his less taxing role, and let's put it that way, as in day to day. You're not on the training ground, you're not coaching a team to manage Spurs this weekend, you're not playing midweek football. You can then be free to make a kind of a distant decision, a kind of a necessarily distant decision, to actually say, listen, I'm going to put in the work here to find a successor to the manager, whereas he might be a little bit bogged down with the day-to-day work, and I guess he's focused on Manchester United this weekend against Tottenham rather than worried about the succession plan to himself.
Yeah, that's right. But finding the next manager isn't just his job. It's partly his job, but it's mainly the people who are going to carry the can if it goes wrong are going to be Darren Fletcher and John Mertes. It's their job to find a new manager. Rangnick is part of that, but it won't be him that has responsibility because it's not him that has the final call. So yeah, he's preparing the team and he'll be feeding back saying this is what the team needs, and I'm sure he'll be giving his opinion. But in terms of actually going to find the guy, that won't be him.
When it comes to tomorrow night, then it's a half-life kickoff, as I mentioned, Manchester United against Tottenham. Do you think that the sort of tough love from Antonio Conte is beginning to work? Do you think that you're starting to see signs that this thing may actually last well into next season and beyond?
Maybe. I mean, Conte is an excellent manager and he's got some good players. The players that he bought seem to have settled in quite well. Kulusevski's doing well, Bentancur's doing well when he's played. And obviously he already had Harry Kane and Son. So that's the basis of something not bad. So we know that Conte is good and we know that he's got good players. They got that brilliant result at City, which I think sort of seems to have inspired them. Then they got the perfect game last week against Everton, which is like kind of the game that everyone wants at the moment. And I think the United Spurs game will be a good game because if United play the way they played in the first half against City, then that will be a level that might see them go in front of Tottenham because they played pretty well. And that's the thing with this United team is they have good performances in them. The problem is their response to adversity, whether it's adversity at the beginning of the game when they got spooked before in the Atletico Madrid game and couldn't pass the ball to each other for the first 45 minutes or so, first 55 minutes or so, or when things go against them, like that happened against Burnley. They played really well against Burnley. They went ahead, then Burnley had 5 minutes of pressure, they scored, and United weren't in the game for 20 minutes. And we know that they're capable of that because we keep seeing it over and over again. So it really does depend. You don't know what's going to happen. And I think that is mainly reflective of the players rather than reflective of the manager, because we saw it a lot under Ole as well, where they wouldn't turn up in the first half and they managed to rescue themselves in the second half. This is a pre-existing thing, and it feels like this squad is going to need some reinforcement, not just with better players, but with strong characters too, because something needs to be done about the frequency of the collapses.
Yeah, and on that strong characters bit, the battle over the captaincy seems to have been one of the narratives of the last while, and one of those that's in the race for it took an unsanctioned, for reports are to believe, unsanctioned trip to Portugal that he's not going to be hauled over the coals about. And we don't know the context last weekend. Was he injured? Was he left out of the team and threw his toys out of the pram? Is he still good enough? Despite all of his legacy and everything he is in terms of football, is he still good enough to play for Manchester United?
Not at the moment. It's interesting and strange, actually, how the decline has gone, because bottom line is, if you said to me, was Ronaldo a bad signing? I would probably have to say, apart from if we take away the reasons that you wouldn't want to sign Ronaldo for nothing, reasons that have nothing to do with football. If you said to me, was Ronaldo a good signing? I think I'd probably ultimately say yes, because without him, United would be out of the Champions League now and wouldn't be preparing for a game against Atletico that they have a decent chance of winning, I think. And with him, they'd still be doing badly in the league. I don't think he'll be at United next season. I don't think we're going to see much of him playing for the rest of this season because he's been absolutely dreadful for the last couple of months. And now that even the finishing seems to have gone, he's of very limited use. The problem United have, obviously, is that they don't have Mason Greenwood. Marcus Rashford is no idea what's going on with him. They don't have Martial, and Cavani's never fit. So they're lacking strikers. But I think that the time has come to move on from Ronaldo, and I think that the manager knows that because he's playing terribly. Any other player would have been dropped quite some time ago, and he's not probably going to be around next season. So if you're looking at United now and they're hoping that they come fourth, they're hoping that they do something in Europe, but really, like, they need to try and be better than this next season. Seems unlikely Ronaldo is going to be part of that. The problem is the aggravation, the media attention, the fuss you get if you drop him. But my guess would be that last Sunday was a dropping, and I don't think we're going to see that much of him between now and the end of the season now.
Right, well, that will be an interesting watch for sure, given his reaction to last weekend. Daniel Harris, thanks a million.
See everyone, bye, have a good week.
Cheers. Daniel Harris on the line there to talk all things United, and Ralph Rangnick, and plenty of reaction to that conversation. Obviously, strongly held views on all sides about the incumbent. It's I don't know. I'm not buying it. I just think that I did rewatch the debate last night. I thought Gary Neville, who I would have, as everybody else on the planet who's ever watched a game of football, have strong views about how good he is. He's a brilliant pundit and has done wondrous things for watching football. But I just thought he was very dismissive of Micah Richards, who I thought was making really good points about the shambles that this has become. I think that I would, as you got from the tone of the debate, I would just disagree with Daniel's points about this being the right thing for Manchester United. In fact, you probably have a lot of players there at the minute who've, because he's doing such a bad job as a manager, have turned against Ralph Rangnick now. And he's the guy who's holding the keys to their future. This whole thing is just entirely illogical.
It is bonkers. There's not much form for this. It's like a person on the way to become a political advisor gets a job as Taoiseach, and that's their training to become a political advisor. It just seems cart before horse in every sense. And I think from what we've heard, he's going to do a brilliant job in his next role, but he doesn't seem to be doing an amazing job in this role. And I just wonder, is he eating into time with his role that he's going to have this summer by doing the job that he's doing now on a purely basic level? Now, in fairness, the other side to that debate, as we heard there, is that he's still figuring this whole thing out, and short-term pain for long-term Rangnick gain.
Oh, I don't know. You could argue that he's like the last person that should be reporting on this thing, given what he's doing. Like, the players are looking at this guy going, he's stinking the joint out. Look, players do that anyway, right? They're like, nothing to do with me, pal. This lad over here doesn't know what he's doing, and that's why I've become a terrible player who can't score goals. Players are going to do that anyway. But the context here is that he's now hanging around the club to go, yeah, we want to keep you, and no, we don't want. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's an awful mess. They're too far into it to actually do anything about it. It's the difficulty. The embarrassment of the ego, that would be the blow to the ego of the club of Manchester United. This would be if they were to somehow reverse out of this entire crazy situation. I think would be too much almost. It's gone too far. Like, they'll salvage some modicum of ego out of it, and they'll come out and puff out their chest and fix their shirt and say, no, listen, that all worked exactly like we had hope it would in a couple of years when Ronaldo was gone, and they've shuffled Rangnick off to be a scout in some far-flung area. And Pochettino is winning Champions Leagues, and they'll say, this is all worked exactly like we had planned. But we all will know. We'll all know.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of people who still hold hope for what might happen over the next little while. A big summer coming up.
Righto, time for the newspapers.